Hi guys, welcome back to my Wargames hobby channel. Today I'm doing part 2 of my look at units used in the Lion Rampant rules. And today I'm covering, as I mentioned in the last video, I'm covering archers and crossbows. So here are two units in open ground waiting to open fire on an enemy. These are the main units you have for shooting in Lion Rampant. They stand their ground and they can't move and shoot. They have to stand still to shoot. But let's look at the archers first. So these archers represent all manner of bow-armed units that are drawn up into bodies of troops as opposed to free roaming skirmishers, which I've already covered. They're not well armoured, nor particularly useful in hand-to-hand combat, but are able to shoot at their enemies from a distance. Archers may be upgraded to veteran, representing both better bow technology, such as longbows and composite bows, and better training and marksmanship. Archers have a higher rate of fire than crossbow armed units, as represented by their better shoot score, so they shoot on 6+, and they move on that as well, incidentally. They also represent slingers and weaker dark age crossbows using the archer profile. There's no difference other than the models. I'll also see the slinger optional rule on chapter 3 on page 119. Let's just look at that first actually quickly. It just says here, in the classic rules, the slingers are exactly the same as units of archers using the same rules and the same profile. If you like to represent them slightly differently, continue to use the archer's profile, but with the following modifications. They use the archer profile -1 point per unit, so the unit only costs 3 points, but the range becomes 12 inches rather than 18 inches. So let's look at the stats of the archers. You'll see they're units of 12, unlike skirmish units, which are only 6. They move and they shoot on 6+, and they only attack on 7+, so they're not keen to get involved in melee, understandably. They have a courage of 4 and their armour is 2. They cost 4 points for a unit. If you want to upgrade to veteran, it's another 2 points. Then their shoot value, which you can see below, which is normally 5+, becomes 4+, which then is the same as crossbows. We'll cover crossbows in more detail in a minute. Now you'll see that in combat, if they should attack, assuming you roll 7+, their attack value is only 6, so they're only hitting on 6s. So they're not ideal for using to attack, unless maybe you're attacking skirmishers. But their defence value, in fact, is 5+, so they're hitting on 5s and 6s, which is not bad really, because since most of the troops that you're going to come up against, which would be heavy infantry possibly and light infantry, they've got the same. If they attack, they're on 5+ anyway, so they're pretty handy at defending themselves, but not attacking. As you can see, they've got a range of 18 inches, but remember, if you look at the quick reference sheet, it says -1 for shooting over 12 inches. So if they do shoot at 18 inches, the archers are only actually hitting on 6+. So they need to be within 12 inches to be effective. And they move at 6 inches. Just a design note at the bottom of the page there. Defence values for missile units include close range shooting as their enemies close in to attack. Closing shots are represented in this way to streamline the rules while achieving a similar outcome. So unlike skirmish troops who can attempt to evade, that shoot and then run away, these can't. They have to stand there. But that's why the defence value is 5+, because they've taken that into account with the troops charging in. You'll notice there's no mention of stakes for longbows. I imagine it's because they only really use stakes in big battles, and maybe for a skirmish the author decided it wasn't worth having them included. It might have been nice to have had a possibility of using stakes. I don't know how you would use them. Maybe a move to place the stakes, and once they're down, that's it. You can't pick them up again, and maybe for a point, you know, and then if you're attacked behind your stakes, it gives you maybe a defence value of 4+, because, you know, the stakes will be doing damage. It's something I might look at using as a house rule. I'll have a word with the guys that play Lion Rampant and see what they say. It certainly would be nice to have in there somewhere. So now let's look at Crossbowmen. I'll just read out the top bit. Crossbowmen are armed with the arbalest or crossbows, shooting at their enemies from close ranked formations. Like archers, they're not especially suited to hand-to-hand combat. But in fact, if you see in a minute that they've got a defence value of 5+, they're the same as archers. But they are dangerous at a distance. They differ from archers by having a slower rate of shooting, represented by their inferior shoot score. So they only shoot on 7+. So they've got a slightly less chance of shooting than archers. But they are more deadly, as benefits a weapon famously banned by the Pope. Earlier Dark Age light crossbows have more characteristics in common with bows than the heavier medieval crossbows, so you may choose to use archer's profile for such units. So you can use the archer profile if you wish. Crossbowmen may upgrade to using pervises. Their large shields protect from missile fire. The unit is also better equipped with weapons for close combat. Now, if you look at the stats, or let's look at the pervises first. There we are, there's the upgrade. Pervises, +2 points for a unit, so they become 6 points. If armed with pervises, the crossbowmen increase their armour by 2 against shooting, which is awesome. So it becomes armour 4, and by 1 against attacks. So it becomes, instead of 2, which archers are as well, it becomes 3. If the unit is in rough terrain or cover, the bonus does not apply, as the terrain is already doing an adequate job. So in fact, you're better off keeping them in the open, because you get the +2 armour if you are in the open, but in rough terrain you'd only go up to by 1 to 3, so they are best kept in the open. Look at the designer now. If your crossbowmen upgrade to pervises, you may choose to represent them with pervises mounted on their own stands, or by including a number of spear-armed pervise holders in your unit. Regardless of the way they're represented, all models in the unit count as being crossbow equipped and protected by the pervises. Now, interestingly enough, at a shootout between a unit of archers and crossbows, the crossbows have the advantage, because they're hitting 12 inches, they're hitting on 4+. The archers are only hitting on 5+, although the archers have got a slightly better chance of actually firing than the crossbows. They may fail to fire. If they're firing at long range, the longbows will be only hitting on 6s, the crossbows on 5s and 6s. So you can see a crossbow unit can be quite effective. Of course, you can upgrade the archers to veteran, and then they would hit at the same rate. They're going to be hitting on 4+ for anything within 12 inches and 5+ for anything within 18 inches. But of course, that's a 6-point unit as against normal crossbowmen. If they haven't got pervises, only 4 points. If you do upgrade to pervises, which is, as I say, the 2 points I mentioned, they are quite a difficult unit to kill, unless you get stuck in close combat. Certainly archers firing at them. I've been in a few games where my archers have been outshot by crossbows, assuming they do get to shoot. Of course, if you play someone that rolls a lot of bad dice, they're not going to shoot anyway. Crossbows have got a courage 4 like archers, and they move on 6+ like archers do, and they attack on 7+, and they only attack with a value of 6 as well. But like archers, they defend with a 5+. They hit on 5s and 6s. I'd like to point out that I don't think you should use pervises unless historically you can prove that they were used. For example, the French at Crécy used Genoese crossbowmen. They had pervises. As it happens, they didn't, because they left them behind in the baggage train. They hadn't arrived on the battlefield before the king ordered the attack, and they went in without their pervises and paid for it, because the longbows, in fact, in that battle were on higher ground and had an extended range, and the crossbows got very badly mauled by the archers on the hill, and in the end retreated without doing much damage to the archers at all. And then sadly for them, the French knights decided to ride them down anyway because they thought them cowardly. So they had a bit of a bad time. But in a game, of course, you would have Pavises, and they are going to be pretty effective with those. I'm a little surprised, actually. The one thing I would say that if they had Pavises, they've still got a movement of 6 inches, which doesn't seem right. You know, usually in rules I've noticed in the past, if you have Pavises, they go a bit slower. I'm not sure whether I might sort of consider introducing a house rule in that, where movement is reduced either by half to 3 inches, or maybe 2/3, that's 4 inches. But as the rules as they are, they don't lose anything for moving with a Pavise, which, as I say, to me doesn't really make sense, but there we go. There is another 2 types of units that can shoot non-skirmish type. They stand there and shoot, and that's heavy cavalry can be armed with bows or crossbows. I cover that more when I do cover those 2 unit types, but basically they can be used. You have to pay an extra point to have bows, and they have a shoot range of 12 inches, not 18 inches, but they are hitting on 5s, so it's pretty good. To shoot, they actually do shoot at 6+. The crossbows, though, only shoot at 7+, though they do the same damage. They hit on 5s and 6s. But the +1 point for mounted bows means that unit then becomes 5 points. If you have crossbows, you don't actually pay for them, but they then become unable to countercharge, and their attack value in melee is reduced from 4+ to 5+. So as I say, I'll cover that more in details later, but certainly Western mounted heavy cavalry can use crossbows, and most Eastern heavy cavalry would more likely be with bows. And here you can see I've got some Saracen cavalry here, which are heavy cavalry, and you can see they're armed with bows, but they're certainly quite happy to charge down their enemies. But if they're within range, they can stand there and shoot as well. So that's it. There's the two main units that you would use for Lion Rampant: bows or archers and crossbows. There's nothing to stop them going into poor terrain and shooting from the safety of cover, although they move at half speed if they do that, because they're not used to going into that sort of terrain. So I hope you find that useful. So the next video up, which will be hopefully in a week or so, I will cover more of the infantry types. I will probably look at heavy infantry and light infantry. I might even throw in levied infantry, because they're pretty useless anyway. So I might as well include those. So that'll be the next video I do in the next week or so. Right, that's it for me. Enjoy your wargaming. Speak to you soon.